Hey, good evening, Galion. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary back on the Monday before City Council meetings to update folks on what's going on in city government and hopefully get an opportunity to answer some of your questions. One of the couple of things that have happened since we last spoke, or I spoke to you all, is the passage of the new gas tax bill, motor fuel tax bill. And depending on whether you're standing at the pump and putting gas in your car, or whether you're sitting in City Hall trying to figure out how to generate enough money to meet at least minimally people's expectations on streets, depending on what perspective you have, I think it's pretty much a compromise and middle of the road solution or change. I think anything that you read would probably agree with that, so that's no great insight. What it means in Galion is approximately $225,000 to $230,000 a year additional for the streets in Galion. Now that's added to a base of about $360,000. So if you were to look in the city budget, you would see one of the funds that's in there is state highway fund, and so a lot of those funds will flow into that, and that will mingle with city income tax dollars that really help fuel our street department, or the street part of our service department. So that's new. I'd written a couple of letters supporting the full tax because I really am concerned about the rural areas and the smaller communities being able to have enough money to meet the transportation needs going forward. I think some viewers will recall that we've talked about a gap in the funding for the widening of 598, and my hope was the more that was added to the motor fuel tax, the more likely that we could make a pitch to Columbus to add to that commitment of about $2.1 million that ODOT's already made to the project. But I got to tell you, when your state rep in your area votes against the motor fuel tax, it really does de-lever the communities in the district. So I don't want to turn these into overtly political Monday nights, but you just really wonder why a no vote when there were demonstrated transportation needs in the district, and it's a little bit frustrating. So that gives you an idea of how much clout your mayor has with the state legislators, and after this wise Alec remark, I probably have less clout. But there was something to be gained by going with the administration, going with ODOT on this. Particularly when the final vote had over 70 votes in the House. That's out of 99. So, maybe by commenting like this we'll get a response, but it's really hard to understand what constituency our representative was representing when he voted with 29 others or something like that, voting against the motor fuel tax. So maybe there won't be an impact, but I don't know. The way government and politics operate, I hope that doesn't impact us going forward as we go back to Columbus and ask for some money for that 598 project. So anyway, enough on the gas tax. A little bit's enough, and what you'll see if you drive from state to state, you'll see little to no difference in the retail price of gas. So those people who want to ask a question or mount an argument about how they didn't need all that money, or that will make gas or diesel fuel more expensive in Ohio, I'm really not. I mean, I'd love to have the discussion, the debate, but I'm really not persuaded by that. I think you see retail from state to state, there isn't a lot of difference, and it's generally not because of the state taxes. So let's just stop there, and I've got a couple old logs I'd saw on if we don't have any questions. So I would like to move over to a topic that we haven't really talked about before, but was discussed I think at some length at the last utility committee meeting, and that was what, for the lack of a better term, I would describe as succession planning at the water plant. What we've found as we've looked at that, just back up a little bit, we've had 2 retirements in the wastewater treatment plant and have filled those with internal changes. And for the most part, those city workers can take on those jobs without having the same level of licensure, or at least the same level of number of years or months in an assisting capacity on the wastewater side. On the water side, it's a different world, and we really are going to have to step back and do some planning and consider adding some people in anticipation of what are 2 likely and perhaps as many as 3 retirements in our water filtration plant. So lively discussion about that. I think the last thing we want to do is catch ourselves in a position where we are unable to have internal people trained in time to meet the licensure requirements of the state. So I think that's something you'll see a little bit more discussion about. Now, in municipal government, under the statutory form, the city service director sets the water rates. So I think certainly within our office we're going to be able to peg the amount that we need for water rates in the future, but where we may need some assistance and need to work with council is adding to the existing budget if we bring on some additional people, let's say someone in the second half of the year to anticipate these potential retirements. So that's something I haven't talked about before. We've then also at the same time looked at the list of capital improvements that the water fund or the water system needs. And so again, we'll have that discussion with council, and if any decisions made to increase spending on the facility, on the plant itself, really what we'd be talking about is increasing the rate at which the replacements were already scheduled. But if that decision is made, you'll see council legislation going through council that would add to the budget line items that enable spending on capital projects. So haven't talked much about water rates, water rate increases, but I would only say that the need to make sure we have qualified staff is going to drive a careful look at maybe adjusting the water rates as we go into 2020. So that's something a little bit new. That's not an old log that I've been sawing on, but it's something that's ever present in our need to balance all the requirements of keeping an EPA certified staff and in our desire to keep rates as low as possible. So stay tuned for more on that. If there aren't any other questions, I'd like to bounce back to a topic that we spent a fair amount of time chatting about and had a good interaction about, and some unanswered questions remain, and that's the Freeze Sports Complex. Most of my conversation has been so far has been about how the facility is designed to meet the needs of existing residents and potential new residents of the community, and that it also has the opportunity to bring people into the community and be a hub of travel sports or more competitive elite sports in various soccer, basketball, volleyball, and other sports that may emerge. The one part I haven't spent much time talking about is the economic development benefits. What will happen if this project is started, and what's the good of that for Galion overall, or specific people who may gain employment or may have an opportunity to be involved in the peripheral development or the extra development that's certain to happen. And so To that end, I'd want to go back to some of the more recent studies that have been done and the prediction of how many potential bed nights there are, and just cite a few numbers. For instance, last weekend, maybe some people were impacted by that in the Galion area, there was the first of several softball tournaments. So you probably, if you went out to eat in Galion, you saw a bump up in activity there, and you certainly saw pretty much full occupancy at the local hotel. So think of that sort of activity happening 25 to 30 weekends a year. And that's really gives you an idea of the frequency and the amount of money that's infused by a facility like the Frieze Center. Certainly, even with a spring, an April softball tournament, there were more people wanting to stay in the area than there were beds. And so one of the certainties that will happen when construction of the athletic facility starts would be, I would say almost simultaneously, the construction of a second hotel. And clearly there's already an existing need for and a demand for a restaurant. And I think that sort of activity gets sparked and begins to happen at the same time the project is being built. So when you look at the opportunity for increased number of bed nights, I really don't talk much about economic development in terms of the tax money that it generates for local government, because I really think what we need to be doing in Galion is doing development so that the community develops, and the future of our town is a lot more vibrant and more exciting than a community perceived as declining and losing population. But to a certain extent, to a lot of people, it is how much tax revenue will be generated. And so with regard to that, if one can imagine doubling the bed tax in terms of revenue, you would see the total available for travel and tourism move up into the $30,000, $40,000 range. One of the things that cities often sink or swim on are income tax. When you look at all of the positions, and in particularly the janitorial, the officials for the tournaments, not just the management staff, but the people working in the concession, those sorts of positions are estimated to generate a payroll in the mid 300,000s. So there, if that materializes, or when that materializes, what you'll see is $65,000 roughly, maybe as much as $75,000 of additional income tax that will come into the city over a period of several years. So I think the bed tax and the income tax are two good examples of how over a 8 or 10 year period you can begin to see the impact for the city coffers and the opportunity for us to tackle other projects with that increased tax revenue. So the upside, the economic development side of this project, I think, is something that we'll continue to hone in on, and I'm hoping people look at that aspect of it before they some may step away and think that a project of this scale is too big for the city to handle, too big for the community to absorb, because I think in both regards it's not too big for the city or a port authority formed by the city to handle, and it certainly is a vision of a future Galion community that has a source of pride and a source of real economic development, generation, and activity. So I'll wrap up that 3-minute, 5-minute speech and see if we are questionless still, or what.
Nope, we got a couple ready here. Jumping back to the 598 widening project, Julie asked, when is that project scheduled to start, and will one lane always be open for business traffic?
Yeah, those are two good questions. The short answer to the first one is July 1st of 2021. That's the state's proposed sale date. That can move around a little bit. It won't get any sooner than that. I can assure Julie and everyone else of that. It may slip a little bit into the fall of 21, but my hope is that we'll get that let in the summer. The plan that the city prefers is developed by the engineer. Will keep a lane of traffic open in both directions. We're really widening on one side and then widening on the other. And without getting into the detail of constructability, that's her question really gets at one of the key things that we're focused on between now and the end of May, when we expect to see the first set of plans developed. And at that point, we'll have an idea of exactly how they're going to phase the construction and how successful we'll be in keeping a lane going northbound and southbound at all times. We've all experienced problems when you get down to one-way traffic, and nobody wants to see that out there on that longer stretch of Portland Way or 598. So our goal is to build it in a way that keeps a lane of traffic open in both directions, and I think we'll likely pay a little bit more if that's necessary in the design to maintain traffic in that way. Too much non-local traffic goes through there, and it really in many ways is the heart of the local traffic flow in the community. So sorry if I over-answered that. But.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Brian. He asks, on North Market Street, why is the speed limit 25 miles an hour all the way out to the dead end?
I hadn't thought about that until I asked, because I sit in the city limits, I believe, now on the other side of Brant Road. I'll have to go out there. I haven't been out there. I don't know if there's a 25 mile an hour sign like north of Brant and Market, but in the city limits it's 25 and it's going to stay 25. We can't lower it, and I certainly wouldn't want to raise it. And I say that with a little poking fun at myself a little bit. I don't know how you could drive 35 in certain sections of North Market. Now, once you get out past Magnolia and the Buckeye Apartments, but that's real rough in there, and Hedrick and on out to Buckeye Road as you go north. So I don't know how you could go any faster than 25, but we do intend to get that evened out in due course. All right.
Okay. Next question comes from Marie. She asks, did someone buy the restaurant by the bowling alley?
Yeah, I don't know anything for sure, but there has been some activity involving the building department, and I think, but don't know for sure, the health department and food inspection. So, we've got our fingers crossed. It's funny, and this gets to the update on the grocery store. Really don't have much, and the overall point is, we've been really from the start of that redevelopment, what turned into was going to be the Ironworks Grill or something like that. The city, when I say we had very little involvement except in a health department way. So we didn't have to do much of building permit activity because it's a commercial permit, and those are done by Richland County. And so we didn't know much about it, nor were we involved to provide any incentives. So that's at one end of the continuum, and at the other end there are projects that without any sort of false credit given to city government, if we weren't involved, they wouldn't proceed in terms of tax incentives or putting in infrastructure and funding, things like that. So this restaurant, before when it was almost opened, and again today, or right now as we're talking about it reopening, we're we're almost in the dark as much as anyone. So if anybody's got a good rumor to throw in there, we'll take it and run with it. But yeah, we've heard the health department and some building inspection activity.
All right, and you already mentioned grocery store, and that happens to be the next question. Dawn asked if there was any update.
No, not really. Not really. I mean, I think we're still moving along. There is continues to be someone interested in the project, and they have to work out those what I would describe as business issues. So we're really we stand by to help them if there's some incentives that'll make a difference. We clarified any potential. I think there was concern a few weeks ago about our electric rates being much higher here than other places they operate, and I can only hope that the numbers we sent them satisfied that.
Okay. Next question on our list is from.
Go ahead.
It's from Chris. He or she asked, what would be the best way to get the sidewalk updated from the old stone slabs on our part of the street to match up with the rest of the street?
Where's that again, please?
Did not specify.
And they want to go to concrete?
Correct. She or he said they have old stone slabs.
I'd have. We aren't going to participate in that, meaning the city. And so as a general rule and specific to this, that's really a homeowner's responsibility. What I would suggest before they did anything is give the building department a call. And they can guide you on that. There's always there's quite a scramble for those old flagstones. So don't create a neighborhood ruckus when you go set those out. You'll have everyone in a pickup truck pulling up and trying to make it their property. So.
Okay, and Chris just clarified it was over on East Payne.
Yeah, I think that's yours. I mean, from, if we're talking about from the old school down to Gill Avenue, I mean, I would pull them out. But again, God, I hate to sound stupid, but that's not something I have a depth of knowledge. So check with the building inspector, see if you need a sidewalk permit to do that.
Okay, that's all the questions I see for right now.
Walk the bike path a little bit today. Had some staff out there. We're going to go, I think, again one more time this week and see what kind of barriers there are. There's a little bit of a fence by the wastewater treatment plant that we've got to reconfigure that, and access to that end of it, what I describe as the south end of the initial segment. But the people that were out there seem to think it's very doable, and so we'll begin to tackle that. And it seems like Matt and I and others in the office have been talking about a bike path since we were in the third grade or something. It seems like forever, but we really have not lost focus or the desire to get that done. So we're highlighting that, and about 3 other projects as our key parks and recreation projects this summer. So bear with us and have a little more patience, and we'll get you a nice. We'll use your money to put in place a short bike path or a real nice walking path, whichever suits you.
Okay.
That's it?
Yep, nothing
Hey,
further.
there was a question a couple weeks ago, and then we'll sign off here in a second. I didn't answer it. And then when we came back and tried to follow up the last time we were on here, I didn't get to it or didn't answer it. And it was about the involvement of the county commissioners. The question was kind of asked from a skeptical point of view. It was something to the effect of, if this is such a great project, why did the county commissioners stop support of it? something to that effect. It's like, well, I don't know if that's fair to say about the previous Board of County Commissioners. But, we got a new commissioner over there in Timley. And we've got a Galion commissioner, Mo Russlot. And so one of my plans is maybe as early as Wednesday, I've got to go over and participate in a meeting at the commissioner's office on the 2020 census. And one of the things I'd like to discuss either after the meeting or at a separate meeting sometime in the near future is really determine to what extent the commissioners can be supportive of this project. And like anything that you go to another political entity and make a request, you certainly need to have an idea of what we'd hope the county, how and in what ways they could support the project. So we'll certainly have 2 or 3 ways that the county could be supportive of it. And so while the question a couple weeks ago, and heck, I'm just learning here. I didn't realize that you at home can see the questions. I can't see them, so when one doesn't get asked or answered, I don't want to have avoided that, and then we forgot it a couple weeks ago. So yeah, the underline on one thing I can agree with Tom about, and that is that we need some level of support from the county commissioners. And it would be a bad signal about the public government support, particularly if they're going to be a whole bucket full of sales tax generated by the businesses that this facility attracts. It would reflect negatively, not on the project though, and not on the city's effort to make it happen. I think it'd probably reflect kind of negatively on the county commissioners. So, we'll wait to see in the final analysis when all the funding is put together. My guess is that the commissioners will be there, and that the interest of Galion's youth and the growth of the community, that they'll be on the side of that. And so I wouldn't count the commissioners out this early in the process. So I'll be talking to them, if not this week, in the near future, and we want to get them on board, that's for sure.
We did end up getting a couple more late questions.
Good.
First one comes from Matt. He asks, is there money available to fix State Route 19, the section that goes south towards Mount Gilead?
Yeah, I'm going to go back where I was talking about ODOT being a great shepherd of our gas tax dollars and scratch my head a little bit. That section south of Dawson, that and I think 19 between Galion and Bucyrus, they chip sealed those, and I don't know exactly what happened, but they are not wearing very well. So the city's responsibility on 19 going south on the east end, 6th Avenue turning into 19, anything south of Dawson is the state's, and it is in pretty crappy shape. But that's who you would call, or we can call and say we had a call and last night on Facebook Live, and they were asking about that. So that section, is in pretty bad shape. We are, however, going to be seeing all of our state routes paved. And off the top, I wasn't maybe expecting that question. I think it's in 2021 that we'll see the resurfacing of all a new top coat, if you will, on all of the state routes in Galion. So if that could be quite a traffic a fiasco if we don't manage the timing of those two contracts, the widening and the resurfacing. But we've got plenty of time to iron that out. But in terms of state routes in Galion 19 or otherwise, a couple of years and we'll get everything resurfaced. I do think we're going to have to, I'm over answering this for sure, but I do think we're going to have to do something about the first block east of the square on Harding Way, between the square and Columbus. That's pretty rough, and I got not a whole lot of good feeling about how from Columbus to Liberty is getting a little sketchy. So that will probably have to be addressed before all the other state routes in town, at least as a Band-Aid or a carryover.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question comes from Matthew. He said, any ideas for the old school lots, in particular the high school and middle school lots?
Yeah, yes is the short answer. I think that there is a sale pending on the old high school lot. Although that could change until the deal is closed. We keep track of the property transfers. My last conversation with the schools is that there is still pending. If that doesn't go to that private purchase, one of the things that I would like to see is to work with the schools to have a what I would call hotspot for tax abatement, and try to use higher tax incentives to bring in some housing into those parcels. Now, that's the high school lot. The middle school lot is owned by the Historical Society. And before that's really going to develop based on what the owners of the property want, there'll have to be zoning change. And I know there's resistance among some of the neighborhood, which is residential. There's some resistance to the Historical Society doing anything other than putting up single-family residence. So that one is probably in a stalemate right now, with the Historical Society having some interest in building some extra storage facilities, and it not really being supported in planning, zoning, and zoning appeals at this point. So that's those two properties. The other old school properties are under private ownership, and I would like to see high tax abatement numbers attached with those, so that would trigger the investment. And maybe next time or over the next couple of months we'll talk a little bit more about why high tax abatements are necessary if we want new housing, new apartment housing that's under discussion now, or new single-family homes around the county. And we can go through pretty quickly some simple arithmetic that I think will explain if the city is asking to, and we are working with the schools to try to get a higher abatement than the CRA rules allow us. This is why we're doing it. It's not because we're have gone crazed at giving away potential tax dollars. It's because of the cost of construction and what that turns into in terms of the cost of rent on nicer, newer apartments, or the cost of housing as it relates to single-family homes that might be built up in the Hesby area. So I think there's a gut reaction. This really wasn't I'm going to answer whatever question I want to, I guess. It's really not. There's a gut reaction against high tax abatements. But the challenge is to address that gut reaction and think through, well, if you don't have that high abatement, will the new housing start be undertaken to begin with? And I think that takes sort of a case-by-case analysis, but I think it's going to cause a lot of opinion makers, community leaders, elected officials to look at that. If what we're about is maximizing tax revenue and not seeing the community grow, then we may lose. You may not optimize tax revenue, and you won't see the community grow. So it's that challenge, that trade-off that we're going to have to think through and encounter, quite honestly, whether it's the new apartment project or a new subdivision that might be a few months or a year or two away. So kind of an over answer to the question, but I think it's something that we'll be probably getting into as we go down the road and continue these discussions. Is that at all what the person asked, or did I just do a Ronald Reagan or a weak Ronald Reagan and make up and answer the question I wanted to answer? What was the question?
The original question was, are there any ideas for the former school lots?
Yeah, okay, good. I answered that, and then in typical Mayor Tom fashion, I over-answered the heck out of it. So All right.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, I do have one more question. It comes from Gene. He asks, is there any answer on no parking from on South Boston Street, south of
Oh, no, there is
the Wilma
nothing new
Crawl
on
School?
that. We will have a committee meeting on streets
This Thursday.
And so some people want to use this forum to get their concern, and that's why we're doing it. I can represent that. But at 7 o'clock on Thursday up at council chambers, we'll be talking about which which streets we plan to resurface and lock those down, and I'll make sure we add that to the agenda to see if it's just a matter of signage or if we have to pass some legislation. Yeah, this is out kind of south of Wilma Crawl, as I remember the question from a couple weeks ago. So thanks for being persistent.
Those are all the questions we've got for tonight.
Yeah, it's fun. For me, allowing those questions to kind of bubble up after they wax and wane. We're trying to figure out how to make this thing work the best for all of us. So, I don't want to belabor it, and I have no rooting interest in the basketball game tonight. So I, like many of the other people, will be asleep by halftime. But, anyways, I do appreciate the people watching, the questions, and get ready for an ongoing discussion about what it's going to take to bring housing to the community, and furthering that discussion about whether or not, if we're not going to build a sports complex to generate economic development, then let's see some ideas coming in for other ways to do economic development. And I'd only say that my favorite thing to do, and what I would like to do, more than maybe a sports complex, is bring industry into the area. But we've got some more pieces to put in place in terms of land and utilities at a new industrial park. And the area that JNF bought, the old Pico property, will suffice us for now. But we've got some other big challenges. And my thinking is, if we shrink from this challenge of building a sports complex to get things going, I'm not real confident that we'll have the courage to go out and build an industrial park that will help guarantee Galion's future for, not me, not us old folks, but for the younger families and for the kids that'll be coming up over the next few years. So anyways, that's what we're trying to get done here. Appreciate you listening, and we'll see you tomorrow night at council. Probably talk to you in a couple weeks on Facebook Live. Good night.